Taxman's hand is in your retirement pocket, and you need to know how deep it goes. Hey, welcome to the Ease Podcast. This is podcast number 26, and I would just entitle this podcast, Everything You Need to Know About Taxes in Retirement. Everything we do at our firm is, at its core, built toward making sure people are either preparing for or going into or living through retirement in a proper way. Today we want to talk about taxes. Now, probably the most famous quote on taxes was by Mark Twain, who said that nothing is certain in this world except death and taxes. But then Will Rogers, the famous quipster, as well came behind him, and he said the difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't change every time Congress meets. And I have to wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, believe it or not, in the time in which I'm making this podcast, regardless of when you're listening to it, we are being told and we are being warned of all kinds of tax changes that are imminent, that Congress is considering, and, infrastructure plans, recovery plans for an already well-recovering economy. But we're being told all kinds of things, maybe to the tune of another 6, 7, or 8 trillion, that's with a T, dollars that are going to be added to our national debt. So obviously, most people think taxes are going to be larger in the future than they are at the present time. So particularly, we want to talk about, and today, in just this short 15 minutes or so, I want to give you just some bullet points. And this is the 5th part of a 7-part series on just building your financial house. Taxes have to be addressed. So let me just give you some things to check off. If you're thinking about taxes, if you're preparing for taxes, these are some things you need to be aware of. And as always, I'm not going to get into individual specific advice. You know my saying, I think by now, if you listen to our podcast, this podcast is not meant to be tax, legal, investment, or gardening advice. And so you need to make sure and talk specifically to us at Mosley Financial if we're your financial advisor, or someone else if they're your financial advisor, or your accountant, CPA if they are looking at it the right way. But you need to make sure and get particular specific information for you. But here we go. 9 things that you need to make sure and know about, or you need to be aware of. Number 1, you need to know your marginal tax bracket. Your marginal tax bracket is wherever you lie in the federal IRS tax brackets. For instance, if you are under $81,050 in adjusted gross income after all the deductions and all the taxable incomes are figured. And where can you find this? You can find this on your 1040. If you're under $81,050, as of the time that I'm giving this podcast originally, in the very early part of the summer of 2021, you're in the 12% tax bracket. Now, here's why. I'll just give you one reason to know what your bracket is. You take a bunch of extra money out of your IRA. That's going to add to your income. And if you're at $81,050 at 12% up until that point, you take another $20,000 out, voila, as the kids say, you've moved into the 22% tax bracket from 12 to 22. So instead of that normal 12% you're used to paying, by taking that extra $20,000 out of your IRA, you're actually going to have to pay tax of about $4,400 on a federal basis by taking the extra money back. So you need to know what your bracket is. So you'll need to know whether to withdraw from a qualified plan, an IRA, and what that might do to you, or wait a minute, we need to take it from a savings or an after-tax non-qualified individual joint trust account, something like that. So know your tax bracket. Number 2, you need to know there's a difference in regular income and capital gains. Now, I'm going to give you the right now because capital gains are one of the things that they're talking about changing, and they're floating a lot of different ideas, and I don't even want to mention those. I'm going to tell you what they are in June of 2021. Your tax brackets, like I said, at $81,000 go from 12 to 22. At about $176,000, it goes from 22 to 24. Capital gains, the first $80,000 of income, no capital gains. Right around $81,000, then it starts at a 15% capital gains. You say, hey, that's lower than the 22. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then when you get around $500,000, as the law is right now, it jumps to 20%. So all things being equal, you'd much rather have things paid on taxes, especially if you're making more than $80,000 as capital gains and not regular income. Well, unfortunately, you don't get to decide, but you might be able to decide whether we take it out of an account that's going to come out as regular income. That's your IRAs, your 401ks, and things like that. Or do we take it out of a joint account, trust account, where the gain that we've had in that account is going to come out as capital gains. So know the difference between regular income and capital gains. Number 3,
Hey folks, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ease into Retirement podcast with Tom Mosley. Just a quick reminder that if anything you've heard so far today has hit home for you, maybe it's something you're dealing with, maybe it's just something you want to learn a little bit more about, there will be a complimentary downloadable giveaway on Tom's website, specifically prepared for this week's episode that you should check out. Just go to easepodcast.com. That's EASE podcast.com. Click the button with the title of this week's episode and get your copy today. Now I'll throw it back to Tom.
There's an escalating excess premium tax on your Medicare Part B and Part D when you go over, it starts when you go over $176,000. So you come along, if you're doing Roth conversions, you not only have to consider what kind of tax you're going to have to pay on the conversion, but what's that going to do to my Medicare tax, and what's it going to do to other taxes that might drive me up in other ways. So just know that there's an excess Medicare tax, and it jumps periodically. Just be aware of it. Number 4, just an encouragement here. Take a macro, M-A-C-R-O, view of taxes in retirement and not a micro view of taxes in retirement. By that, I mean this. Some people are so concerned with what I paid last year and what I'm paying this year that they never look out 5, 10, 15 years and say, what am I going to pay overall? And how long am I going to have to pay it? And how much might it go up in the future? And when I start taking my RMDs, how's that going to add, required minimum distributions? How's that going to add to my tax basis? So you need to make sure that you're looking down out the windshield of the car as you're going through retirement, not just out the rearview mirror and seeing what you paid last year and being aghast at what you had to pay last year. You might need, please listen, you might need to pay more in taxes now, this year, next year, and the next year, so that overall you could save a ton of money on taxes and your overall tax bill. Again, talk to your advisor, talk to us. That's number 4. Number 5, don't get caught in the required minimum distribution trap. At 72, you have to start taking a certain amount of money out of your IRAs and your 401ks and any other of what's called tax qualified plans. So just know that's coming. Know that that money cannot be harvested and taken over into a Roth. That money for the required minimum distribution has to come out, and it has to go into some after-tax account, because they won't allow you to take that and move it over into a Roth, because, yeah, you would pay tax on it one time, but you wouldn't put it into an account where you would continually have to pay tax on it. They want to tax you. So just know that you could get caught in a trap thinking that your required minimum distributions is going to be your harvesting into your Roth. Can't go there. You can harvest after the required minimum distributions are taken out, but they have to be taken both and rather than either or. Number 6, likely your Social Security is going to be taxed at some point. Now, there's this crazy formula they use to come up with provisional income, and it's half your Social Security money, all of your income that you earn, all of your dividends and capital gains, and all of your non-taxable interest like muni bonds and things like that. They add all of that together. And if you're single and you go over $25,000, they start taxing your Social Security $1 at a time as you go over that $25,000 level. And there's a whole lot more details there. Married folks, it starts at $34,000. So just know when you're planning for retirement, I told you the tax man's got his hand in your pocket in all kinds of ways. They're going to have their hands in their pocket likely when you're taking Social. Say, I'm under 25 and I'm under 34 married, I'm under 25 single, then you're okay. You're okay. But when you go over that, just know. All right, number 7, we've alluded to this already. Harvesting from an IRA, that as long as you have money in that IRA after 72, you're going to have to take money out and pay tax on it, might be a great idea to harvest that money and pay extra tax over a period of time. Might be a good idea. Your specific situation needs to be analyzed, but it might be a great idea to harvest that money over into a Roth that is never taxed again in your lifetime. And if the account's in your name and you're married, it never is taxed again in your spouse's lifetime. And then when the second one of you passes away, if there's still money in that Roth, it goes to your children. And there's some time limits on how long they have to take it out, but it's never taxed when it comes out to them. So harvesting, number 7, harvesting might make sense to you. Number 8, don't get caught with an unnecessarily high widow's penalty. Now, here's what I mean. What is a widow's penalty? Well, the most famous saying for 2 become 1 is when 2 people get married, and in God's eyes, the 2 people become one flesh according to Scripture. But 2 become 1 again in most people's cases, in that if people are married and they've lived a long life together, there comes a time in over 90% of the cases where the 2 that are married, they lose one of them and there's only one left. The first year that happens and you file tax the next year, from the year of death, you're still filing jointly. But the year following that, you slip into the single filer's tax bracket, which means, let me go back to one of the first things I said. At $81,050, you move from the 12% tax bracket to the 22% tax bracket. When you go to the single tax filer, it's less than $41,000. At that level of income, you move from the 12% tax bracket to the 22% tax bracket. In other words, your brackets get cut in half. Your marginal tax rate begins to mushroom faster and faster and faster when 2 of you become 1 because of the passing away of one of you as a partner. All the more reason to look at tax harvesting. All the more reason to look at getting money into Roths where they're never taxed again, out of IRAs where they're forever taxed as long as they're in there. So you need to really look at it, talk to somebody about the widow's penalty and how that's going to impact you. It's too late to do it the year after the one of you passes away. That was number 8. Number 9, just remember, and this is a disclosure here, anytime you're listening to this podcast, they're perpetual, they're evergreen, they're always going to be on the Ease podcast site. But if you're listening to number 26 about taxes in retirement, and you're listening to it down the road 6 months, a year, it doesn't have to be that long. All tax laws are written in pencil. And they can and they will change. So make sure that whenever you're listening to this podcast about taxes in retirement, you're getting up-to-date information, and you're getting that information from somebody who's proactive, trying to look at your situation, making sure you're not paying too much in taxes. Remember what Will Rogers said, the difference between death and taxes is death doesn't change every single time that Congress meets. So remember, let me go through them again. Number 1, know your tax bracket. Number 2, know the difference in regular income and capital gains. Number 3, understand the Medicare Part B and D excess tax penalties. Number 4, take a macro look at taxes, not a micro look at taxes. Look down the road a few years, not just 1 year. Number 5, don't get caught in the RMD, required minimum distribution trap, and not pay them. Number 6, understand Social Security is likely to be taxed. Number 7, harvesting may be in the plan for you. It may be what you need to do. Number 8, don't get caught in the widow's penalty. Number 9, always check and make sure that whatever you're listening to, whatever you're taking for advice, that person is up to date on tax laws because they change on a regular basis. Hey, if you like this podcast, share it with a friend. And you can go on and rate us, and you can subscribe to us if you want to, so that you'll get a notification every single week that we're on. Hey, help us in any way we can. Get the word out, because we're trying to help people avoid paying as much tax as they can legally. We're trying to get them to avoid paying as much tax as they can legally, and that's our goal and what we're trying to do. So until next time, this is the Ease into Retirement podcast. I'm Tom Mosley, your host. I promise you that if you'll give me 15 minutes or so, I'll do my best to increase and build your financial knowledge. I'll see you next week.
Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services. Ed Slott's IRA Advisor Group is a paid membership educational organization comprised of professionals of varying credentials. Membership in this organization does not imply a set level of skill or training. The logo and/or service mark is the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement of Tom Mosley is stated or implied.
A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.